Welcome to the Freak Show, fellow freaks.
I'm Matthew Brockmeyer.
And I'm Christa Carmen.
And this is
Murder Coaster.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are thrilled to have Harry H. Reid on the show to discuss his book, Tongues of Deception, the story of the 1933 human sacrifice of Lucinda Mills by her own son, John, during a backwoods Pentecostal revival outside Tomahawk, Kentucky. Welcome, Harry. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on, Matthew. Appreciate it.
All right, so we want to dive right in, and one of the things that we're most interested in is, how did you first come to know about the case?
Well, I've been into genealogy for over 35 years, and I had taken my grandparents back as far as I could, and I was kind of running out of things to do, so I decided to look into aunts and uncles and cousins, and that's when I ran into this story. It was, it involved one of my uncles who I was related to by marriage. It was his family.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been Lucinda was his grandmother.
Ah, that's so interesting.
So when I was researching this, you know how strange of a story this is. And I was telling my wife, I'm like, well, I'm glad we're only related to this through marriage. But then I found out that I am the fourth cousin of John H. Mills's wife. Her maiden name was Hall. That's my middle name.
Wow.
And so I'm her fourth cousin. I'm a fourth cousin to one of the doctors that testified in the trial. I'm related to the Mills family through blood and marriage. I'm also related to Harrison Hinkle, who was one of the deputies, through blood and marriage.
So there was basically no way you weren't going to fall down this rabbit hole.
Right. When I found all that out, I thought, well, that gives me some skin in this game, and I'm going to go ahead with this. So it was 2 years of research and a year writing the book. So 3 years later, here we are.
So you're in Ohio, right?
Right. Yeah.
So did you go to Tomahawk?
I was down there, yes. Matter of fact, my family had been down there before. There's a lady in the book named Ora Moore. That's my uncle's mother. And we actually went down there and visited her back in the 1950s. We stayed in her house.
She was one of the most fanatical of the followers.
Right. And I mean, I'm sure my parents knew nothing of this at the time, but yeah.
She became very respectable. She became the postmaster.
Yes, she did. I mean, she became the postmaster of Martin County. And I mean, it was just, and that's the thing. All of these people, for the most part, went on with their lives and made something of themselves and kind of put this behind them. And there had to have been some forgiveness going on down there because, I mean, a lot of these people were related to each other. I mean, the prosecuting attorney was the brother of the defense attorney.
Right. That's so crazy.
I mean, just you basically had cousins arresting cousins down there when this was going on.
Can you tell us a little more about your research? Like, were you, did you have to start in libraries and archives, or did you start right in with interviewing people because of your connection?
Right. Well, with doing genealogy, I had a list. I mean, it didn't take me long. I had a list of about 125 descendants of people involved in this case one way or another. Now, getting those people to talk was another problem. There's still a stigma down there today about this case. And I was able to interview 23 descendants. And then there was no shortage of newspaper articles. I mean, like I said, it was nationwide news for 4 months. So those were all available on newspaper.com. So I had that. I was able to get the court records and the penitentiary records. So I just kind of made, with those newspaper articles, I just kind of made a timeline. And then I tried to weave those personal stories that these people told me into that timeline. And I tried to use the system where I had to have at least two sources telling me something before I put it in the book. So it wasn't, because I'll tell you, there was out of those 23 people that I interviewed, I probably had five different stories.
Mm. That's always the way, right?
It's just, when this stuff is passed down orally throughout the years, it seems to change. And, after a while, I could tell what side of the family these people were on by the stories they were telling me. They didn't have to tell me who they descended from
Oh, that's fascinating.
because everybody had their own angle,
Mm.
according to what family they were from.
Mm, right.
So, it was pretty interesting. And that's another thing that kept me going on it is just I love oral history, but you do have to take it with a grain of salt because, I mean, I'll tell you, for instance, there are people today that I know and I've met through writing this book that are from Martin County, and they swear to me that chains were not used in this crime.
But
Even
didn't they bring the chains out in the courtroom, right?
even though the the Commonwealth of Kentucky's main witness testified that Linda Mills was wrapped in chains, even though the deputies and the sheriff testified that she was wrapped in chains, even though there's a picture of one of the deputies standing there holding the chains.
Mm.
Actually, there's multiple pictures of different deputies holding the chain. But they swear that that's not the case, that the press made that up.
Wow.
But Trixie and Aura were chained earlier too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah, just going through this my own little bit of research, I noticed like Lucinda's age is never one place says she's 67, another place says she's 72. There's
Yeah.
just so much
Well, I mean,
discrepancies.
being a genealogist, I will say that's not uncommon, especially for back then. And the area they were in,
Right.
records weren't really kept real well.
Mm.
So that's not unusual for people really not to know some of them didn't even know how old they were.
Wow.
You know, again, it was just what they were told. They didn't really have paperwork to back it up.
So how
But
did you try to handle discrepancies when you found them in your research within the writing?
well, I mean, doing genealogy, like Lucinda was actually born in West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
So if you go there, you can find her birth record. And
Nice.
um, I forget now exactly what year she was born, but I know what it was. She was in her late 60s when this happened. She wasn't in her 70s yet. Um, but I mean, you may not be able to pinpoint things, but you can narrow it down. There's enough records there where you can narrow things down.
Okay. I like that. You can't pinpoint, you narrow it down.
Yeah, I
Makes
mean,
sense.
and people will ask me all the time, well, is this everything in here facts? Well, they're facts as far as what we know,
Right.
and what we've been told. I can't guarantee you that everything in the book is absolutely true. You at this point, there's nobody, even when, 3 years ago when I was researching this, there wasn't anybody alive that actually witnessed it.
Mm.
So you can only go by what people have been told.
I'm still like kind of staggered when you were saying that you used to go and spend time at Aura's house.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, I
it's
have
like,
pictures. I have pictures of my dad's old car. My dad standing there, my sister, and we're just, knee high to him. So I think it was 1959 when we were down there
Mm.
at Aura's house.
That's wild. So in the book, Lucinda at first calls the Pentecostals heathens. Do you think
Mhm.
this was the general consensus at the time in that area? Was there a lot of pushback
Well,
to this
there
like
was,
boisterous form of Christianity?
right, it was totally different from what they were used to. They were all Baptist. And so yeah, this was totally different. And I think when you had, the depression going on, people in Mount Martin County, and I suppose all over Appalachia, they they tended to use their church time as entertainment as well.
Hmm.
So when they saw this, I mean, this was really different than what they had been used to, with all the jumping around and the upbeat songs, and everything was just um, strange and new to them. And I think that attracted a bunch of people. I mean, but it even went back before that. I mean, I didn't talk a whole lot about it in the book, but what the catalyst to all of this was this girl named um, Mary Skaggs. She was an evangelist, and she was just a little girl when she got started. She got her license to preach when she was 14.
Yeah, we talked about that. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
and she passed away in 1933. Um, and she's in the Pentecostal Hall of Fame.
She baptized 3,000 people, right?
Right. Yeah.
It was just
Yeah.
like a carnival, man, setting up the tents, the
Right.
music,
Right.
everyone's singing.
Yeah. And see, that's where William Duty comes into the story. He's in his 50s when all of this starts, and I mean, I'm of that age where I can't imagine having to work as hard as he was working when he was that age. He was a coal miner. Now, he had given up what he would did as a coal miner. He was what was called a track man. So he would take this little train down into the coal mine. He would take the miners down and then bring them back up and bring the coal back up with him. So
Mm.
that's what he was doing. But still, he had to go down in that mine every day. And then, of course, he had a farm to take care of, when he got back from doing that job. So he was kind of looking for something that would, support himself and not be as hard. And when he saw little Mary, I think the light went off in his head.
So them collection plates going around, and I was like,
Yeah,
I can do
yeah,
this.
yeah. And like I said, the depression's going on, so you're just looking for anything to hold on to. And I think
Right.
he saw an opportunity there and went with it.
All right, well, let's talk about my favorite part of all of this, the taking up of serpents. I have long been totally fascinated by this. It's so
Yeah.
crazy. It's like a freak show.
Well, I mean, that is a part of some Pentecostal churches, not all, but it is a part
No,
of
definitely
some.
not. Yeah. It's illegal in a lot of places.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to say this is, once, I mean, I'll just kind of jump ahead a little bit here, but when he kind of broke away from the Pentecostal church when him and William Duty had this fight over who was in charge. So I don't know that I'd actually call this a Pentecostal thing when after John breaks away from it. But up to that point, William Duty was at least portraying to be a Pentecostal preacher.
But he really had no credentials. He was faking it
Right.
all, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And he's not the only one down there that did that.
Right.
So it wasn't really anything that strange that somebody would just start preaching. Um, but the style of preaching that he was doing and everything was definitely Pentecostal. And snakes were a part of it. And from what I hear, he wasn't going to handle snakes, unless he knew he wasn't going to be injured.
They had their venom glands removed.
Right.
That is wild.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was told that, um, by two different people from two different lines of descendants. So I'm pretty sure it happened.
What a scam, man. That's like
Yeah.
old
Well,
timey
sure,
like
he
scam.
can,
Yeah,
he's not going to get bit. If somebody does get bitten, then he can claim to heal them.
that's awesome. That's so cool. Well,
So,
he
yeah,
fared better than a lot of these guys. I went down like the rabbit hole a little bit, like George Went Hensley. He was like one of the first guys, and he ended up dying because
right.
of it.
Yeah. Oh, I
That
saw a
guy is a
video
character, man.
I saw a video the other day with this guy. He's bitten over 100 times, and he says, and I mean, I don't this film I was watching was from the 60s, so he's probably long gone by now because he was probably in his 50s or 60s when this video was made. But he didn't worry about it. He said, if I die, I die.
I was telling you, I was watching a video from the 70s last night, and the one guy got bit, and he lived. He did live. But then they're like, at the end of the video, they're like, but the leader of the church drank strychnine and died like a few months after the video was done, which is
Yeah,
another thing they did. They would drink
right.
poison.
Yeah, drink poison. Yeah,
And then
yeah.
in this video, I saw there was people actually in this. There's nothing in the Bible about this one burning themselves. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It was
Oh, there
crazy.
was. I mean, there were some things that I didn't put in the book that I've learned that happened. I mean, there was a guy that did an interview for the paper, and he said that they, would pour boiling water over people's heads
The
to
New
cure
York Times said that, I
to
think, didn't
cure
it?
them of a headache.
Yeah.
Oh
I'm
my
like,
goodness.
you know, it's just I think what happens, and there was a doctor that testified in the trial, Dr. Fairchild, and he had looked into these cults and everything of Eastern Kentucky and West Virginia. And he said this springs from how isolated they are. Like, I don't believe if these people had lived closer to Inez,
Right.
which is just like, I don't know, 6 to 9 miles, something like that, from this little village of Tomahawk, I don't think this would have ever happened. There were so many things. I mean, the police were notified 3 different times about what was going on there. And only on the third time did they go try to do something about it. Had they done something before, they probably could have stopped the whole thing. But and I believe if somebody would have just said something. I mean, he had already tried to sacrifice somebody, and they protested, and he stopped it.
Wait, what was that one?
That was the one with Aura and Trixie.
Oh yeah, where
Trixie
then
was
it had to
nine
be
months
willing.
pregnant, and,
Right.
and they've
Trixie. Yeah.
got them both chained to this pile of wood and soaked with gas, and John's
Yeah.
getting ready to light the thing, and Trixie yells out, "No, no, no, I don't want this to happen." And he puts the torch down, walks away.
Well, what cracked me up, he's like, it has to be a willing sacrifice. But maybe we should kidnap a neighbor or use one of the children. Like, how is
Right.
that willing? Like, what are you
Or
talking
the
about?
first person to be sacrificed, in what he said was a command from God, was William H. Duty.
Right.
Hmm.
You know, now you're
Right.
going
How
to,
convenient.
are you telling me that he was going to be a willing
Yeah.
sacrifice?
He's like,
You
I'll
know?
definitely be there. I will
Yeah.
see you tomorrow
Yeah.
morning.
Yeah. He actually agreed to show up, but he didn't.
Yeah.
He knew something was up, but yeah, it's strange what people will do, and that's the thing about this book. It will actually show you what is possible if you give up your own agency and you just go along with whatever somebody says.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great installment in cult true crime literature.
Yeah,
Matt and I cover lots of cult cases on the show. We've both always been super intrigued by
right.
like cult mentality and cult leaders. But yeah, it's just and Matt and I talked a little bit on the episode too. Like I was thinking while we were um, going through the facts of the case and all the when the people all fall into the speaking in tongues. And I would love to know what's like going through their minds in that time, if it's just like
Right.
full just giving over and they truly are believing it, or if there's like any little nagging voice of like, what are you doing?
Right.
Like,
Well,
fake it till
I
you
think
make
there were,
it.
this was a smallish cult as far as cults go,
Hmm.
and it was basically family members. But there were a couple there that were just, well, actually, Tommy Boyd and his wife Talitha, you know, this all happened in their home, and they left to go get help.
Yeah.
Um, and then John's wife Alma kept trying to, get him to come to his senses, and
Right.
but I'm sure he wasn't the first cult leader to ever use fasting and sleep deprivation. And I mean,
Yeah, make people
that's
a
what was really
little
going on here.
crazier.
Yeah. I
I think
mean,
that's for the it's just like the most common thing that they do. Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, there's no surprise there that he was able to get them to do. That's what I always, when I first heard about it, I'm like, how in the world do you get 8 family members to agree to kill grandma,
Grandma.
aunt, you know, mom? Um, shoot, when we get our family together, we can't decide what we're going to go eat.
Right.
You know? And here they're, you know, okay with that. So that interested me. How did that happen? And I found out, how it happened. It could happen to anybody. That's the thing. I mean, if you're not eating and you're not sleeping, and you've got somebody diabolical enough to use that on you, you could fall for anything. And it's wasn't the first time. It's probably not going to be the last.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we covered a cult in Chile, fairly recently that like just fell into madness and sacrificed a baby, one of the
Yeah,
people's babies. It was just like it was very similar. They were staying awake for days. They were doing ayahuasca. It's like this, that it's like a psychedelic root.
yeah,
And but they were up for like days and days and praying and going into this ecstasy and stuff. Yeah, and sacrificed a
yeah,
baby. That was pretty brutal.
yeah. And when you think of, I mean, I just wonder really how diabolical John was because, why did he have them bring all their kids?
He
Yeah,
did
that's
mention we should kill the children for a second, right? It did
Yeah,
get
well,
brought
yeah,
up.
well, after Tommy and Talitha had left, then somebody suggested they sacrifice 5 of his daughters.
Man. And after all the trouble they had having them and keeping them alive, with tuberculosis and measles and
Right.
everything
Yeah.
else, it's like this struggle.
Yeah.
Crazy. But he was paroled not that long after. I think he only did eight
Well,
years,
they
right?
all, I mean,
They all
three,
got it. Yeah.
three of them were found guilty. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life. And Ballard Mills and Blaine McGinnis were found guilty of accessory to murder and sentenced to 7 years. I'm sorry, 21 years. And none of them served their time. Blaine was out in a few months, like 3 months.
And Ballard was out within a year.
Ballard
They were
was out
both
in a
pardoned by the
couple
governor,
years,
right?
yeah, and John only served 8 years.
Yeah, but then John didn't do anything too crazy except getting married and divorced like 3 or 4 times to the same woman.
Yeah,
But
to the same woman, yeah. And you know what? He ended up moving back down to Martin County and lived next door to Ora Moore,
his sister,
who
yeah,
he tried to sacrifice.
right, right. And
jeez.
she was all about it. She's like, yeah, burn me alive. Let's do it. Huh?
Yeah, I like I said, the fasting and the not sleeping played a big, big part in that. I came to know Ora later on. I mean, she moved up here to be near my uncle, and I sat down with them and ate meals with them, and uh, was over at her house here where I live, and went to her funeral. And
Did anyone ever talk about
you
it at
you
all?
would have you would have never guessed she was ever involved in something like that.
Right.
Not in a million years. But stranger things have happened, I guess.
that, this is pretty strange, Joe.
Yeah.
The
So,
trial sure was wild, man. They set up a stage. They had bluegrass music event.
oh, that was, I mean, that's another thing. You get involved, I've gotten involved with people from Martin County since I wrote the book, on different Facebook pages and everything. And they talk badly about the press and how the press reacted to this.
Mm.
And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, the press was pretty bad. But the press has always been bad when it comes to portraying anybody from Appalachia. But what they have to realize is, I don't know if you've seen the picture of the crowd. I have a picture up on my website.
I don't know
And
if I
I gotta
saw.
check that
the
out.
whole, yeah, tonguesofdeception.com. The whole town is just flooded with people. I mean, it's shoulder to shoulder, and you can't even see the streets or anything, and they set up a stage and they had entertainment. They were selling corn dogs and, I mean, all this, candied apples. And I
Hmm.
mean, it was like a carnival. And those were local people. I mean, those were people from Martin County and West Virginia and Johnson County, Kentucky. So you really can't say too much about the press when your own people were fascinated with what was going on. I mean, it was it was something else. I mean, the Palace Hotel there was completely booked for the 4 months that this went on, and I mean, it was, they had radio. They would
It's
had the
crazy.
trial
Okay.
updates and everything on the radio there.
I think they would pelt them with rotten eggs and vegetables when they were brought from the paddy wagon to the courthouse.
Right, but I mean, you had two different sides of that. I mean, you had people that were trying to protect them too, and then you had other people that were, trying to throw stuff at them and everything and calling them names and all that. And these people were pretty much all related to each other.
They kept dropping John on his head.
Yeah, can you imagine when they announced who was guilty and all that? I would have loved to have been in that courtroom because how did the people react? Because you got people there that were glad to see the ones released and mad that some of them were found guilty, and then the other way around. It was just this a dynamic that I don't think you see all the time because of people being related to each other.
Yeah.
It is a very like it, it it's like there just seems like there are so many points along the way that things could have gone differently, and it's like
Right.
everything just continued to converge to produce this
Right.
really
I always say
horrifying result.
in my interviews, so many things could have happened that would have stopped this,
Yeah.
and it just didn't.
But then again, our country's founded on freedom of worshiping and religion, and you know what I mean. I mean,
Oh,
you
that's the
can't kill
thing.
people, but at the
Yeah,
same time, you should be free to. And I think that's maybe probably one of the reasons the sheriff didn't go out there right away, right?
it is. I mean, the sheriff, matter of fact, the sheriff said, look, I've seen this before. I've seen this happen before. It'll all settle down, So, I guess I understand that. But, I don't know. I guess times are different, but I would think if there were children involved like they were, that
Yeah.
they could have
Yeah, it's very
done more than they did. But I know times are different then.
Yeah,
So,
children almost got sacrificed too.
I
It's
know
crazy.
yeah.
it's very for I mean it's a horrible enough case as it is, but it's
I mean, being
better
in
that
genealogy, I know of cases where men have beat their wives right on the streets of the city, and they were charged $5 for it.
Mm.
So, and this was in
insane.
the 1930s. So things have changed.
Oh yeah.
So,
Thankfully, yeah.
yes, thankfully. But yeah,
Those poor kids
strange.
watched it through the cracks in the walls too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then to have to testify to that. And there's another picture I have that I'll send your way. But it's of four of the girls that were to be sacrificed. The press took them back out to the cabin where this happened the next day to take pictures of them in front of the cabin.
That's
Oh my
brutal.
God.
That's crazy, man.
Come
Yeah.
on, kids, smile, line up.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, it's just stuff like that. And like I said, chasing down Lucinda's funeral procession so that they could get a shot of her in the coffin and just,
It's straight up ghoulish, literally. It's
yeah,
literally ghoulish. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, that part of the press I get, when these people say that, they didn't like the way that the press treated them down there. I understand that part, but there's a little bit of that going on with the townspeople too.
I mean, look at their antics. It's like, it's crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
I saw the pictures of John Lane in his cell. They were pretty
yeah,
intense, you know.
yeah. That was right after he was force fed.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's some interesting pictures from that period that the newspaper put out. And, I've got a picture of them carrying John out of the courthouse.
In the chair.
He's not in a chair. It's two deputies have him on either side of him, and they do have a rope in their hands because they had to tie him to a chair in the courthouse. But yeah, and there was a period there where they took him into the courthouse strapped to a cot or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but yeah, they had him tied to that. Um, but another thing I found strange is the Commonwealth allowed four doctors to come in and testify as to the sanity of these guys. Two of them that the Commonwealth paid for were just medical doctors. And one of those, Francis Marion Picklesheimer, is my fourth cousin. And those two medical doctors said that everybody was perfectly sane. The defense attorneys got two doctors from the lunatic asylum in Lexington, and they said these people were at the very least temporarily insane, and that John was totally insane. But the Commonwealth of Kentucky chose to believe the medical doctors, so they went on with the trial.
It is kind of strange, right? That one of the things that I thought was weird about this case was that John didn't come to this, religious fervor himself. He was guided there by the Reverend. I mean, it was his
Right?
idea that so it's again just kind of like one of those instances where like I don't
Well,
know. I mean, it's like maybe he saw in him, I'm sure he saw in him somebody that could take up and be a good, obviously he got people to follow him and to the utmost degree. So
right?
the
Yeah,
Reverend
when
must have
when
seen something in John that made him think that he would be able to lead
well, it
people.
wasn't only John. I mean, William Duty, he wanted to plant that Pentecostal church in Tomahawk,
Right.
and it did very well. And so it wasn't just John that saw that in William Duty, other people saw it too. But with John,
Mhm.
you got to realize, I mean, this guy had just, he'd lost his daughter, a 2-year-old
Yeah.
daughter, and then he loses his job, which, when the depression's going on, that was huge,
Yeah.
and then he gets involved in this church and everything's looking up. They have another child, and then he feels this church being ripped away from him. And then he, ends up getting in an argument with William Duty one week and in a fist fight with him the next week. And I learned this after I wrote the book,
Mhm.
but people say that's William Duty had a glass eye. I had no idea until after I wrote the book, but um, I mean, people have told me that's where he lost the eye, was in that fight. Yeah. So, I mean, this was not just a regular fist fight. I mean, I believe John was going to kill him unless he was, if he hadn't been
Yeah,
pulled off of him, he would have killed him right there.
that's certainly what it
But
seemed like.
John was
You
a
know?
smart guy. He had been reading he could read for one. A lot of them couldn't even, were
Right,
completely
right.
illiterate. And he had been reading the Bible since he was 10 years old.
Yeah,
He's
he had an eighth grade education, which was really good for that area and that time. And most didn't, you know. And so, yeah, and he had a good job. I mean, he was working for the Columbia Gas Company, you know, and most people down there didn't have jobs per se. They lived off the land, or they worked coal mines. If they had a job, they worked in the coal mines, or the timber industry was tailing off then because they had cleared cut everything. There wasn't a whole
mm,
lot left. Um, so yeah, I mean, he was doing about as well as he could have been expecting to do, you know, until all of this happened.
the craziest character arc for me is Lucinda, because she starts as this dour Baptist saying, "Oh, don't get involved with those heathens down there. They're bad."
Yeah,
And she
yeah,
goes 180 degrees to the point where she's like, "Sacrifice me. I'm a willing sacrifice." And like, it's a wow, man. You know?
yeah. Um, well, some things. I mean, she believed what she was hearing. You know, I mean, there were rumors going around that that John was able to turn water into wine and vines into snakes. He was doing these healings. Um, but just as fast as all of that went that way, it kind of turned around on him because they found out that these healings really weren't healings. They just happened to line up with the timing,
Right.
like, the little girl that had the headaches, and, they went away. Well, after a while they came back. So, you
Yeah.
know, he
Yeah. And
healed.
Edgar in the tuberculosis ward wasn't getting any better, and everybody else. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but one thing I wish I would have done different in the book is the fact that, they claimed they were doing this to get his brother Leonard out of the insane asylum. That God had told him if they have a human sacrifice, that he would release Leonard from the insane asylum. So John and Blaine and Ballard are found guilty and go off to prison in April of 1933. Leonard was released from the insane asylum May 1st, 1933.
So it worked.
It basically it worked. Yeah. Yeah.
Lucinda went over there and just cast out the devils. And
Yeah. I mean, obviously we know that that was just coincidence. And the thing is Leonard had been in and out of that place for a long time. I actually interviewed Leonard's son,
oh wow.
and he wasn't even born when this happened. I think he was born like 3 or 4 years later.
God,
But
how many kids did that guy have? Because he already had 9 kids at that point.
which one?
Leonard.
Leonard? Oh yeah, I mean, well, they all had huge families. I mean, Lucinda had 14,
Right.
but I guess Leonard um, drank a lot and would beat his wife and kids. And for whatever reason, they didn't put him in jail. They sent him over to the insane asylum.
Yeah, that's a little strange.
Yeah.
I mean, alcohol will affect your mental
Well, sure.
issues.
Yeah.
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 So it could have been an
Right,
underlying
but
mental thing exacerbated by the alcohol.
Right. Right.
yeah, I mean, I guess I shouldn't have said strange. Just strange that he didn't have like any legal, like there was no subsequent or corresponding like legal issues that he had been in because of that.
Well, when did
Well,
Prohibition end?
I
It's
mean,
right on the cusp of that.
yeah. Well, these people didn't, they didn't care about prohibition. That's for sure. But um, yeah, it could have been. Here's the thing, too. With everybody knowing everybody there, maybe they sent him there because then there wouldn't be any legal ramifications.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
You know?
it's almost better in a weird way, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. If we send you to jail, you're going to have to pay fines and, all this and that. And
But there's that double-edged sword. That's what One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He pretends to be crazy so he can not go to jail, not get the fines. But then he gets there and they're like, "Well, we're never going to let you out."
right,
Oh
right. Yeah.
shit, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But like I said, I don't know that I totally believe that that's why the group did this was to get Leonard out
Hmm.
because he had been in and out of there before. It wasn't like this was a one-off and he was in there and out. And it wasn't the last time he was in there.
Right. John
So,
just got it stuck in his head that someone had to be sacrificed. He was all
well,
obsessed with
I
what
think,
Abraham and Isaac and
like I said, he lost his daughter, he lost his job, he lost this church. He wasn't going to lose this group.
but he'd already just lost half of them because of the healings weren't working. He
Right.
really was in desperate straits.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's why he did what he did. But what always got me was, when he said that he had to have it had to be a willing victim. And I'm like, no light went off in anybody's head. Said, well, was William Duty going to be a willing
Right.
victim?
Or one of the neighbors. Just
Yeah.
kidnap a
I know
neighbor.
that's not even in the church. It's like,
Yeah. Are these children going to be willing victims? I mean,
But Aura was, but they decided not to kill her at the end. That's crazy.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, what you got to realize is these people's faith was real.
yeah,
It was, this particular incident was misled and misread, but their faith was real.
Oh yeah.
And they kind of felt, I think they kind of felt putting all the, fasting and no sleep aside, that if this was a divine command, they really didn't have a choice.
right. They really, really believed it,
Were they
clearly.
Yeah.
really getting naked around the bonfire, or was that just the neighbors starting gossip?
Well, I mean, I heard that several times or saw that several times in the newspapers. I heard people say that in the interviews that I did. And you got to remember, this was February when this happened.
It's snow. It's
There
snow
was
everywhere.
snow on the ground, the day of. So yeah, yeah,
Mm.
that's another thing. I mean, they haven't been eating, they haven't been sleeping, and they're cold. You know, like I'm sure there was a stove in the cabin, and I know there was a stove. All the barns back then would have some type of a wood burner or coal burner in the barn. So they had some source of heat, and then they had the bonfire going all the time. So there was a source of heat, but still,
Is there photographs of the altar?
no, I haven't not been
What do
able
you
to
think
find
that
it.
altar looked like, man?
I think it was just a pile of sticks myself. I mean, and they called an altar in the cabin, but it was a bed,
Right.
is what it
Wow.
was. Rhoda Hatfield Mills testified to that fact. You call it whatever you want, but it was a bed.
He got mad when they didn't build it because they
Yeah,
all went to sleep. That reminded me of
yeah,
like Moses coming down from Mount Sinai with 10 commandments and finding everybody worshiping the golden calf. You know what I mean? He's like,
right,
I go out
yeah.
for 10 minutes. What the hell are you doing?
Or Jesus going to pray and come back and find his disciples asleep.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. It just couldn't really be a stranger story, I don't think.
No.
It's wacky, man. It's
I mean, I mean, and it just, when I was researching, it just kept coming and coming and coming. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, there were people that were trying to tamper with the jurors.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were caught
Tamper with the
outside
what? Sorry.
when they were trying to pick
Oh,
the
the
jurors.
jur. Gotcha.
As they were leaving the courthouse, there were three guys that one of them was related to Blaine McGinnis, a cousin, and they were warning them, if you're picked, you better find them not guilty or bad things will happen. And it just so happened that this old guy who worked there was leaving the courthouse and they thought he was a potential juror. So they did the same thing with him. And he goes back in the courthouse and tells them what's going on out there.
So there were still devout followers, even during the trial and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, it just depends on which side of it you came down on. I mean, uh, like I said, I would have loved to have been in that courtroom. The dynamics going on inside there had to be something else
Yeah.
because everybody had their opinion. And, like I said, everybody being related to everybody else. I would have given anything to be able to see that.
Yes, indeed. So, switching gears a little bit, what are you up to now? Are you writing another book? Is there another case that you are
Well,
into?
let me put it to you this way. You're looking at a guy that when I went to school, I don't think I ever read a book completely through. And when I said I was going to write a book, my mom said, wait a minute, the boy who wouldn't read is going to write a book. So,
Okay.
I write a book in my 60s, and I'm working with a lady named Libby Ewing right now. She's an actress, writer, director, producer. We're writing the screenplay for a movie.
Very exciting.
And we've got some plans I can't talk to you about right now about
Okay.
that, but really excited about what lays ahead. But I hope to have written a book in my 60s and having a movie made in my 70s. So,
Can you say if it's connected to this or not, or no,
oh
you
yeah,
wouldn't?
it definitely is. It's about this.
Oh, okay. I didn't
Sure.
know if you
Yeah.
had somebody had found you and said, "Oh, you did such a good job on this. Like, do you want to cover a
No, no,
different
no.
case?"
This is about
Gotcha, gotcha.
this story. Yeah.
It'd be a
Very cool.
fabulous movie. So good. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's what that's the thing too. When I first started this, and some of my first reactions that I got were like, I'd go do meet and greets at libraries and things, and people would say, "Well, when's the movie coming out?"
hmm.
I'm like, I haven't even thought about anything like that. And I tell you how it all happened. I did not go to anybody about this. One of my big worries when I wrote this book was because of the way I portrayed William H. Doody. I thought if I have trouble with anybody in this book, it's going to be a descendant of William H. Doody's. So I did my due diligence and I found out an awful lot about William H. Doody that I did not put in the book
Mm.
because it really wasn't relevant to what was going on in the book. But uh, he was dishonorably discharged from the service. He was married 5 times. His brides kept getting younger and younger. The last time he got married, he was 54 and she was 14. Um, so I mean, I really had all this documented. And then one of the first people that contacted me was I can't remember now whether he was the great grandson or the great great grandson of William H. Doody. And I'm thinking, oh, here we go. And he's like, no, he says, we knew how he was. And he says, the reason I contacted you is he says, I know a guy, his name's George C. Romero, and he's a movie producer. And he said, I would like to take this book to him. And he did. And we got together and he was looking into it and wanted to do it and was looking for financing and all that. In the meantime, a lady in Newark, Ohio, read the book, and her daughter is Libby Ewing. she reads the book and then gets on the phone with her daughter and says, "You've got to make this your next movie." That's how I got in touch with Libby. And so that's what
Well, I
we're
had to look that up.
doing
Okay,
now.
so we're talking about the George Romero's son. Okay, because I'm
George,
like George A. Romero is that? I'm like,
George A. Romero. This is his
yeah,
son,
this
George
is his
C.
son. Because I
Romero.
was like, he's been
Yeah.
dead for a while now, like for about
And
10 years.
actually, George C. Romero is now the film commissioner of Eastern Kentucky.
Oh,
He lives in Louisville, Kentucky.
he does. They were originally from Pittsburgh, I believe. Oh,
I don't remember what.
that's
Yeah,
where
yeah,
like
yeah, right,
Dawn
right,
of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead was all
right,
shot there.
right.
Yeah.
But he had moved out to L.A. for a while, but then his wife
Oh, right.
also they ended up moving back to there. He owns a restaurant down there now. But he's the Eastern Kentucky Film Commissioner.
Cool.
Very cool.
So I'll be working with him with this project.
Awesome,
Very
man.
exciting.
It can say
we
so
hope,
much artistically
yeah,
about faith and life and insanity and like
yeah,
America and the Appalachia.
Familial
so much.
connections.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, it is our hope to film down there in Martin County and Johnson County.
Nice.
That's what we really want to do.
Beautiful country.
And that area could certainly use
Yeah.
something like this to happen for them. But that's what's going on now.
Very exciting.
Screenplay is going to keep me busy for a while, and then hopefully the movie. So I don't know if there's another book in me or not. I mean, I didn't imagine this one was going to involve 3 years of my life, and now it's going into a screenplay and hopefully a movie. So that's going to take up a couple years.
Well,
I have lots of ideas, but I don't know. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Where can our listeners find more information about you? You want to give some social media shout outs?
Well, yeah, they can get me on Facebook. Tons of Deception. I have a Facebook page for that. They can get me Harry Hall Reid on Facebook. They can go to www.tonsofdeception.com.
There's a lot of photographs and stuff there, huh?
Yeah, there's pictures and things up there and stories. I have a blog that I write different stories about people from the book. Has some extra things in there that I didn't put in the book.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, the book is Tongues of Deception. Get it anywhere fine books are sold.
Well, actually, you can only get that on Amazon.com.
Get it on Amazon.com. We will put the link in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining us, Harry. It's absolutely fascinating, crazy story.
yes, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Matthew and Christa. I appreciate you having me on. Hopefully I can get back with you with some further news here once things move along here.
Oh, we'd love to hear more, for sure.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Harry.
You take care now.